Hello and welcome to A Taste of Anthropology with me, Professor Burlingame. I am coming to you live, large, and in charge from the Empire State. This podcast is the first in a series of podcasts where I will be using anthropological wisdom to address the life skill of tolerance. Now, what is tolerance, you may well ask? Let's be frank here. Intolerance is probably something many of you, dear listeners, are far more familiar with. You can probably even name a specific incident in your own life or in the lives of others, past or present, that illustrates intolerance. And this is a major reason why I want to talk about tolerance and not intolerance. Intolerance has a great PR firm working for it, metaphorically speaking, of course. Intolerance looms large on the social stage in cultures around the world and through historic time. It is a big bully, showing other big bullies exactly how to do things. I'm going to let you in on a little personality quirk of mine. I do not like bullies. I have come across them numerous times in my life, and I have always, in one way or another, gone toe-to-toe with them. Not always winning against their toxic behavior and toxic world building, but certainly never losing. Bullies are intolerant. I'm going to reinforce for you how to not be a bully, or how to be tolerant. Now, let's talk a little bit about what tolerance is not. Being tolerant is not about accepting abuse from others or agreeing with actions that do not fit your values. Being tolerant is not about compromising with others to such an extent that you get nothing out of an alliance. Being tolerant is not about being a doormat, a victim, or a pushover. Tolerance comes from deeply understanding others. Being tolerant is an act of understanding where others are coming from, even if you do not agree with them. Being tolerant, like forgiving others, is actually a gift you give to yourself, because it is through understanding where others are coming from that you can more fully understand where you stand, who you are, and what you mean. The act of being tolerant, like so many other aspects of living a human life, is an opportunity for enormous personal growth. So I'd like to address tolerance through the word primitive. The use of this word to describe human beings flies directly in the face of tolerance, and as a result, it undermines the ways that understanding others helps us better understand ourselves. When you define something or someone as being primitive, you are, in essence, defining it as lower and less than. You are relegating it to a forgotten and useless past that is of little value and worthy of little to no attention today. You are dismissing it without really understanding it. Now, I'd prefer if you didn't use this word, as it is inaccurate, misleading, and ethnocentric. However, I am not the language police, nor do I wish to be so. I am, though, urging you to understand what you are saying and doing when you use this adjective. It is not a value-free word, and you are encouraging yourself and others who hear your description to diminish whatever is primitive in your eyes. You are encouraging misunderstanding. Now, wait just a cotton-picking moment, some of you may be saying. Don't anthropologists use the word primitive in their work? Why do they do it if it's so useless and ethnocentric? This is an excellent point. Thank you for making it. Anthropologists like Margaret Mead and Napoleon Chagnon have used this word in their work, and other anthropologists may do so as well to this day. I do not generally agree with its use, but I do agree with scientists defining their terms and explaining why they use the terms they do in their science. This acknowledges that scientists have subjective as well as objective aspects to their work. Just because a scientist uses the word primitive does not mean that it automatically becomes scientifically objective and informative. It simply reveals a scientist's perspectives and prejudices in a clear way so that they can be understood differently than the rest of their work. The acknowledgement of these biases is key because everyone has them. Having biases is not a problem if addressed correctly. Pretending not to have bias is a problem. Primitive is still an intolerant word, and it encourages intolerance no matter who uses it or their reasons for doing so. A tolerant alternative would be to describe who, what, why, where, and how in detail and leave primitive as misleading shorthand completely out of the equation. So now let me give you 2 examples of tolerance in the real world using some cultures that have inaccurately and ethnocentrically been described as primitive by some. There is an ethnographic film entitled First Contact. It was made in the 1930s in Papua New Guinea. In the film, there is a scene where indigenous men meet outsiders for the first time, men from Australia. The locals are a bit alarmed by the dress of these men. In particular, they find their shorts to be very unusual. The indigenous men discuss this choice in clothing, wondering why they would cover their genitals in such an impractical manner. They wonder how they're able to urinate. Then they wonder if maybe they aren't human and therefore do not need to urinate. After more discussion, they finally decide that these men are in fact human, but a different kind of human who wears unusual clothing. Another example. The Sami are an indigenous pastoral or herding culture who live in the countries of Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia. The governments of Sweden, Norway, and Finland have made long-standing autonomous governing agreements with the Sami to continue to practice their pastoral economic system. The Sami people make a living through pastoralism in the midst of larger nations where the majority of people make a living through capitalism. So what we have here are 2 examples of how tolerance works, through an acceptance of difference. For humans, difference is inevitable. You only have to look at your own family, neighborhood, community, or country to know this is true. Humans can't help being at least a little different from one another. Accepting this difference, understanding it, and living together regardless is a key life skill and a key life lesson. Difference does not have to be dangerous, nor does it have to preclude different people from living and working in close proximity with each other. Difference is not an automatic point of contention or conflict. It can just as easily be a point of understanding and agreement. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not trying to convince you that difference has not been at the root of human conflicts in the past or present. We all know that this is the case. What I am arguing here is that difference is also at the root of human accord and stability. The choice of which way it will go is in large part up to the people involved. My challenge to you as you go about your life this upcoming week is to see where you can be more tolerant with others. Your goal should be less to live peacefully and more to take the time to understand someone else's perspective so you can better understand your own and better interact with them. Build connections with others, despite any differences, based upon your shared humanity, your shared need, if you will, of clothing or a way to make a living, for instance. Apply these examples where they are needed in your own life and see what tolerance can do for you. Did you enjoy learning more about this topic through Anthropology? Would you like to learn even more? Well, you're in luck. Visit the website, tasteofanthropology.yolasite.com for all the ways you can learn from me. Please join the email list when you're there if you're not yet subscribed. And please, feel free to share and support this podcast if you liked it and found it useful. It's been my pleasure to bring it to you. Until next time, goodbye and take care. Hello and welcome to A Taste of Anthropology with me, Professor Burlingame. I am coming to you live, large, and in charge from a little bite of the Big Apple. This is the second episode in my Tolerance podcast series. If you missed the first episode entitled Primitive, then stop right here and find it to listen to before you continue with this episode. I give you introductory information on anthropology and tolerance, as well as specific cultural examples of tolerance as it relates to the concept of primitive. This information is needed to set you up well for this episode. Now don't be shy, I'll wait. I've got a lovely cup of herbal tea to keep me company while you learn. I'll still be here when you get back. Go on. The ability to be tolerant is actually a learned life skill. You may or may not have learned it, or you may or may not have learned it well, but regardless, you can always learn tolerance and improve upon your tolerance skills. Why? Well, here's the rub about being human. We need each other. I know, this can be a surprisingly controversial thing to say in some quarters, and you may disagree that what I'm saying is true. But I'm not steering you wrong here. We do need each other. Anthropologists have been studying humans for more than a century, and amongst the many, many revelations about our species, one of the most significant is that humans are social creatures. Like almost all other primates, humans are born, live, and die in social groups. Within these social groups, humans learn the things they need to survive. Basics like how to get food, clothing, and shelter, as well as more complex things like dealing with other humans. We learn these things over and over and over again in different contexts and in different forms, not because we're slow, but because the people we interact with and the social groups in which we live change over time. In order to keep up, we have to keep right on learning, adapting, and changing. This is an essential truth for humans, and it is part of the reason why we need each other. Now, some of you may be arguing that there are humans who do live completely separately from other humans, and that they prove that we don't need people to survive. I can't speak for every aspect of the lives of people who live like this, but I will say this. Had they not been born into a human culture and raised by other humans, they would not have the life or the skills they've taken with them to survive on their own. They also wouldn't have at least some of their supplies without the creation and industry of other human beings. This is a fundamental truth for all of us. We need each other, sometimes even despite our best efforts to disengage with each other. Having the ability to be tolerant can facilitate our interactions with others in our daily lives. Tolerance can be used in any part of our lives, from family relations, to the classroom, to community organizations, to politics, to international relations. Being able to pull tolerance from your tool belt when it is needed is a key way to handle many interactions with your fellow humans. But how can you be tolerant? Let's just be frank here. Other people can be wildly annoying, if not downright infuriating. While you may get along with some people, you're probably not going to get along with everyone. And even if you do, not everyone is going to get along with you because, let's face it, you too can be wildly annoying and downright infuriating to others. You know it's true. The solution to this is not to simply and indiscriminately get along with others no matter what. Nor is the solution to never get along with anyone because, what's the point? The solution is to know how to be tolerant of others, their perspectives, their personalities, their values, without necessarily agreeing with or condoning them. The solution is to understand others while also understanding yourself, your perspectives, your personality, your values. I'm going to lay down another anthropology truth about humans for you. Humans are both the same and different. Contrary to some, humans have much in common, even as we have many distinctions. These are both true at the same time for our species. Anthropologists will study humans based upon some of the ways we are the same: family, economic system, gender, power structures, art, healing systems, and cuisines, for example. Much of anthropological work is involved in comparing and contrasting these universals because even though you can find them in every human culture, They may not be done in exactly the same way in every human culture and through historic time. See? The same, and yet also different. Anthropologists will also study the ways that humans are biologically similar, blood, bone, and genes, for instance, that are then used to compare and contrast our biological differences, because even though humans are biologically very much the same, yes, even genetically, to an extent that makes us look biologically as if we are a very closely interbreeding species, we do not all react biologically in the same way to things like disease, reproductive health, toxins in the environment, or food. The same, and yet also different. These similarities are where we can begin to build tolerance with others. Now, I do want to address an issue you may run into as you strive to be more tolerant of others. You may encounter people who are stuck in intolerance. They may even have reasoned, in their mind, arguments for why being intolerant is the right thing to do. How you handle this will depend largely on your relationship with this person. If it's simply someone you encounter in a public place, then it's probably in your best interest to let them go about their intolerance without your input. Leave that to the professionals who are trained to deal with the extremes of this kind of behavior, like law enforcement, doctors, and psychologists. If it's a family member or friend with whom you aren't very close, or who is far too toxic to bother with, then the same action can apply. If, however, this intolerant person is a close family member or friend, then it may be in the best interest of your relationship, and you, to use tolerance with them no matter how intolerant they may be to you or others. Appeal to them on an emotional level through what you share. Forget trying to reason them out of their intolerance. This tactic probably won't work. After all, as far as they're concerned, intolerance is the way to go, and they have a worldview that reinforces this for them. Instead, build upon their feelings with and for you. Create bridges that remind them of what they share with you and with others. If the intolerant person in your life is someone with whom you work, say a coworker, customer, or patient, you can use similar tactics to the ones you may use with a close family member or friend. If, however, this person is someone you lead at work, then it is important that you continue to create and recreate an environment in the workplace that rewards tolerance and doesn't accept intolerance under any circumstances. People who work for you need to follow rules and expectations. Otherwise, they do not need to work for you. It's really as simple as that. As a leader, it is your responsibility to set the tone and then reify it at all levels in your company and on your teams. Remind everyone, including yourself and others in leadership positions, to emphasize your shared goals and make work policies and work assignments that reflect this kind of cooperation. Intolerance in this kind of environment cannot be accepted, coddled, or ignored because, besides it being detrimental to the individual, it's also detrimental to the company as a whole. This is not only good human policy, but it's also good business policy. Working together is how things get done on the job, and let's not forget, also in life. So my challenge to you this week is for you to choose someone in at least one of these interpersonal categories: family, friends, coworkers, subordinates, to practice improving your tolerance skills upon. Look for your similarities and not just at your differences. Focus on the ways that you can meet them on the things you share in common and use these to facilitate your interactions with them. What are your shared goals? What are your shared values? Shared interests? Shared activities? What do you share in common that you can use to grow a more positive outcome? Now, I'm not going to lie. Just like my challenge to you in the last episode, this isn't an easy thing to do. When it comes to humans, very rarely is anything easy. However, not being easy is not the same thing as being hopeless. Nor should any difficulty you may encounter automatically mean you can't do it ever or that it's impossible. Your success here is in part up to your willingness to try and try again until you get it right. Tolerance is a skill worth learning and honing through doing. It can improve your interactions with others and allow you to grow in your personal confidence and interpersonal relationship skills. I can assure you that it's all worth the effort. If you'd like to learn more with me, then please feel free to visit my website, tasteofanthropology.yolasite.com. Sign up for the email list while you're there in order to receive a free anthropology educational gift from me. And please, feel free to share and support this podcast if you liked it and found it useful. It's been my pleasure to bring it to you. Until next time, goodbye and take care. Hello and welcome to A Taste of Anthropology with me, Professor Burlingame. I am coming to you live, large, and in charge from Sleepy Hollow, New York. This is the third episode in my Tolerance podcast series. If you missed the first two episodes entitled Primitive and Nature Nurture, then stop right here and listen to them in my podcast feed before you continue with this episode. I give you introductory information on anthropology and tolerance, as well as specific cultural examples of tolerance as it relates to these topics. You will need this information to help set you up well for this episode. As always, I'll wait for you to finish. My handy-dandy cup of herbal tea is by my side. There's a lovely autumn view right outside my window. The group will see you once you get back. One of the underlying tenets of intolerance is its insistence upon there being room for only one right thing, be that an opinion, worldview, lifestyle, behavior, etc. Intolerance is bred from this mentality that posits that there is not enough room for more than one. This means that any encounter with difference should automatically become a fight for supremacy to establish the one on top, the one and only winner. Here's the thing, though. There isn't only one. Now, I know this may raise the hackles of a few, and let me be clear here. I am not suggesting that every bit of diversity is correct, meaningful, or right for every last person on the planet. I am not suggesting that values or preferences are of no value. All I am saying is that diversity is a basic truism for humans, and the work of anthropologists backs this up. In the course of the century plus of anthropological research, anthropologists have discovered countless ways that humans have, in the past and currently, done everything from feed, shelter, and clothe themselves, worship, marry, create families and raise children, create and value art, govern themselves and handle conflict, to name but a few examples of human diversity. When it comes to humans, two things are clear. For as much as we are all the same, we are all equally just as much different. Humanity has embodied this seeming contradiction from the beginning of human time, and it doesn't seem to be going away for our species anytime soon. There was a discussion in anthropology in the 1980s and 1990s about globalism and its impact upon human diversity. The assumption at the time was that globalism would create more and more homogeneous human cultures with little to no variation. Everyone would use machine technology. Everyone would consume the exact same media. Everyone would wear the same clothes, get the same medicine, eat the same food, want the same things, think the same way, and act exactly like each other. However, in the years since this hypothesizing amongst anthropologists and others, the world has continued to globalize, with many ideas, products, and technologies being shared around the world, and yet the diversity remains. After all, although there was a McDonald's in Beijing, how people in that city and around China understood and frequented this global American fast food chain is not how people do so in the U.S. You could make the same argument about McDonald's in any city, in any country, anywhere in the world. The fast food restaurant, McDonald's, is the same around the world, but how people eat there, what they eat, how they experience the dining, what place they have in their life for this fast food, how they interpret it as a part of American culture, etc., is all different. Again, we see this human pattern of being both the same and different. Out of the same restaurant, humans have still created diversity. This process of adopting something from one culture into another is what we anthropologists call diffusion, and it has been going on since the first human cultural groups began interacting. Diffusion can, and usually does, bring about cultural change, but the course of that change is not certain. Anthropologists can speculate and hypothesize, but cultural change is the result of too many factors for any one or group of anthropologists to predict 100% accurately, as we can see with the McDonald's example I just described. Cultural change does not happen in only one direction, and diffusion has just as much of a chance to make two groups similar as it does to increase their differences. For humans, diversity is a staple, a feature, if you will, of culture. So, in the face of this reality, that humans are diverse, and that diversity is something that can come out of even human efforts to increase homogeneity, my advice for the intolerant is to stop being afraid. Rather than being abnormal, unusual, or scary, diversity is actually just a normal part of living a human life. Unless you want it to be, encountering difference doesn't have to be unpleasant. Differences of opinion, worldview, and lifestyle can be of passing interest or the impetus for profound change, but you have the choice to take on that responsibility, whatever way you choose to do so. And this is my overarching recommendation for those dealing with intolerance and for those meeting it out. The responsibility is yours. You get to decide how you behave in the face of intolerance, yours or someone else's. Take that responsibility on and be more human about it. Start by accepting that diversity happens. Then accept that this diversity doesn't have to be a threat or a challenge to war or a duel. It doesn't have to be an opportunity to decide who's on top in a hierarchy. You may think that you're gaining something by viewing every instance of difference in this combative way, and perhaps you are in the short term, but you're also undermining your ability to handle life, which is all about difference and change, in a healthy way. Finally, accept that the world is big enough for difference. You are not going to agree with every human on the planet about everything, and not every human on the planet is going to agree with you about everything. Even a group of two humans is going to have differences of opinion. Even families and people in romantic love with one another disagree, sometimes quite strongly. Expect this reality and handle it with the confidence that it is normal and you can still go on even if you never come to an agreement. The danger of intolerance is that it encourages small thinking, small behavior, and small possibilities. To counteract it, you must expand your thinking, your behavior, and your possibilities. You must do this yourself every time you encounter intolerance. Focus less on the stuff others are or are not doing that you have little to no control over, and focus more on what you can do. Change in the world starts with change in the individual. That's a variation on Mahatma Gandhi, by the way, and not a Professor Burlingame original. Before I go, I do want to make one more point. Some of you out there may have listened to this episode or the other episodes in this tolerance series, and you may be thinking, but Professor Burlingame, I know about all this. I already know how to do this. You may think that this is true, and it may be. However, knowing something is not the same thing as doing it. If you were attracted to this podcast or this series, then odds are you're not doing what you need to do to understand and overcome intolerance in your world. So, I'm encouraging you to get past the knowing and start doing. Your action is what kickstarts your growth and the growth of those around you. I know you can be a positive force of change in the intolerance around you. You can do it. What you might not know is that I have an exclusive email list whose members have a chance to ask me free questions based in anthropology topics that they find interesting or struggle with. To join the list, please visit my website, tasteofanthropology.yolasite.com. Sign up for the email list and you'll receive a free and fun anthropology educational gift from me. And please, feel free to share and support this podcast if you liked it and found it useful. It's been my pleasure to bring it to you. Until next time, goodbye. Take care.